Peace is a lie. There is only passion. Through passion, I gain strength. Through strength, I gain power. Through power, I gain victory. Through victory, my chains are broken. When your paths crossed. The memory of the first encounter with your master is still fresh in your mind. You remember it as if it were yesterday. The way he looked at you, the spark of interest that flashed through his eyes, the potential he instantly perceived in you. Pick a location and a context. The bazaar. It was one of those noisy and smoky sulks that flourish on the most squalid planets, whose atmosphere is saturated with the smell of spices and drugs. He was wandering around like a tourist amidst the cacophony of beasts, merchants, and machines. The slave market. Half naked, a collar around your neck, you were dragged like a dog onto the stage to be presented to potential buyers. In the midst of the yelling and bidding, the man calmly raised his hand and stated his price. There was an instant silence. 10 minutes later, you belonged to him. He then removed your chains. The pickpocket. The man seemed harmless and his purse was full. The opportunity was too tempting, and your belly too empty. Hiding in the crowd, you approached silently and his hand grabbed your wrist, lying fast. You thought your last hour had come, but the man just smiled. Not bad, he said, but you're lacking practice. I could make you faster. The back street. He clearly wasn't from here. The way he moved around was too relaxed. Not a hint of fear on his face, despite the district he was in. He ignored the prostitutes who tried to approach him, and the scrawny junkies begging him for money. Calmly, he walked into the alley. The little beggar. He stopped in front of you, young beggar in rags with emaciated cheeks. Accustomed to the regular beatings by members of the night patrol, you cowered, prepared to get beaten up, but the man simply put one hand on your shoulder and said, "Stand up and follow me." The ambush. Gangs of street urchins are not uncommon in such places. The territory of yours included the alleyway the man had just walked down. The knife you aimed at his throat didn't even touch him. He struck 5 times with his bare hands, and all 4 members of your gang collapsed, dead. You didn't. When the man came out of the alley, you followed him. You had passed the test. The jungle. The deep jungles of your homeworld are filled with deadly dangers. Yet it's not unusual for intrepid treasure seekers to venture into the marsh in search of riches buried in ruined temples lost in the forest. The man you met that day, however, had come for a completely different reason. The hunted. You were running away from something terrible that day, probably a ferocious beast, abandoned by the members of your tribe for a crime that the clan chief had accused you of. You would have died if you hadn't bumped into that man in the middle of a clearing, radiating an aura infinitely more dangerous than a local predator. The hunter. Within your tribe, tradition dictates that a man must kill to be considered a true warrior. The one you chose that day for your initiation rite did not seem particularly dangerous. A lost traveller, perhaps. You realized too late that in this story, you were the prey. To this day, you still don't know why he didn't kill you on the spot. You never saw your tribe again. The ballroom. It was a beautiful place where the aristocrats of your homeworld met regularly. A gigantic bay window giving a bird's eye view of the city. Sweet music making the air vibrate. Women dressed in ravishing dresses and exotic jewelry. And this strange man. The humble one. You were just a discreet servant in charge of bringing drinks to the guests and making yourself as noiseless as possible. Yet the man, as soon as he entered, had laid his eyes on you and never stopped staring at you. It was only after several hours of observation that he approached you and made you an offer. The noble. As the eldest son, or one of the most influential men on the planet, most people trembled and sweated when they spoke to you. Not this man. You had never seen him before in your life, and yet he approached you as if he was an old friend. Smiling, he bent down to whisper something in your ear that you'd never forget. The village. You never knew where the attack came from, nor the identity of those who that night burned the houses of your village and massacred its inhabitants. Bandits? Mercenaries? Luckily, they didn't pay any attention to you and left quickly after their crime. The Orphan. The man found you the next day amongst the fuming ruins of your home. Slowly, he forced you to let go of your mother's corpse, which you had clung to all night without realizing it. He grabbed you by the arm and took you away from the mutilated bodies that had once been those of your parents and friends. The amnesiac. What happened that night was probably too horrible for your brain to process. Your mind broke and left you amnesiac, wandering between the ruined houses without remembering your name or your past. When you try to remember the face of your parents, only the face of that man comes to mind, the one who found you and took you with him. Something caught his eye. The potential he spotted in you would probably not have been enough to make him choose you as his disciple if he had not felt something deeper within you, a special resonance with the dark side of the Force. Pick a drive. Ambition. Whether a rampant obsession to become the strongest has been hanging deep inside you for a long time, or whether you are consumed with the idea of ruling and holding in the palm of your hand the destinies of billions of living beings, what you desire is to reach the top. Crushing all those who stand in your way does not frighten you in the least. Be wary, though. That kind of hunger can hardly be satiated, and you'll always want more. Despair. It seems like something inside you broke a long time ago. Hope, joy, a particular event in your life, or the environment in which you lived, has plunged you into a bottomless pit of despair. As they say, fear leads to anger, anger leads to hate, hate leads to suffering. And nothing in the world leads more quickly to the dark side of the Force than suffering. It only took a second for the man who found you to read all this in your eyes, and much more. Hedonism. The galaxy is vast and has no shortage of virtuous men, nor does it lack degenerates of all kinds. You are a condensate of all sorts of perversions and unhealthy desires the light side of the Force cannot fulfill in any way. Satisfying the forbidden desires that haunt your thoughts can only be done to the detriment of any bond, any friendship, any love. The way of the hedonist is the way of solitude and selfishness. And who knows more about selfishness than a Sith? Vengeance. Unlike some men consumed by immense anger that they blindly unleash around them, yours has a very specific target. Someone or something has wronged you, and the only thing that still urges you to live is the idea of revenge. Revenge against a particular person, an organization, or society in general. A man promised you that he could help you in this vengeance by making you stronger. For that, you are ready to follow him to hell. Evil. Evil in its purest form. There's no better way to turn it. What you have in you is not mere pettiness, or a kind of cynicalism that makes you indifferent to cruelty. It's a thirst for blood. A willingness to inflict suffering out of sheer pleasure. A deep sadism that you have, until now, never been able to indulge or fully explore, forcing to hide it in order to survive. The man who found you, however, offered you the opportunity to fully immerse yourself in it. Relationship. Every Sith Master is led to form a special and unique type of relationship with his disciple. Yours was no exception. Pick a form of teacher-student relationship. Tyrannical. Like many Sith apprentices, the relationship you had with your master was based on fear. He took great care, from the very start of your training, to make it clear that he could kill you in the blink of an eye or inflict immense pain at will. He taught you to hate him, and thus prepared you, without you being aware for it yet, for your final test. Abusive. Your master made you his pawn, entirely devoted to him and his plans. He manipulated your emotions and exploited a sentimental or psychological lever to constantly accentuate his ascendancy on you, knowing your weaknesses and flaws better than anyone else, and using them to shape you according to his desires. Formal. He was your master and you his disciple. Nothing more, nothing less. If he was ever cordial to you, he always remained extremely cold, considering you without emotion or attachment, sometimes even without the slightest interest. He erected a wall of ice between you from the very start of your training, to protect himself from you, perhaps. elusive. As surprising as it may seem, you were almost never in direct contact with your master. Oh, throughout your training you felt his invisible hand weighing on you and manipulating you from afar, like a puppeteer, recognizing his touch on every obstacle in your way. But he took great care to show himself as little as possible, remaining in the shadows and shaping you for his twisted plans and confusing schemes. Eccentric. Your master was quite the thing, verging on madness. You were never comfortable with him, and maybe that was his intention. One day he could talk to you with affection like a father to his son, and the next day he could punish you terribly for daring to look him in the eyes. You were always on your guard, ready for anything. Philosophy. The Jedi's are far from being a homogeneous organization in terms of morals and ideas, and the Sith are even more divergent than they are. Each Sith Lord has his own worldview, his own aspirations, and his own distinct methodology when it comes to training a disciple. Pick up to 3 ideologies to which your master adheres. Warrior's honor. Your master has taught you that a fight without honor is repugnant, and that a victory is only worthwhile if it is achieved in an honorable manner, without cheating or trickery. He whose skills and strength are not enough to defeat his opponent is not a real Sith. The end justifies. Your master believed that a true Sith should go to any length to achieve their goal, no matter the moral implications of their actions, whether it is murdering colleagues or backstabbing a foe. He taught you countless dirty tricks to use in a fight. Credo first. Your master was a passionate adherent to the credo of the Sith, believing that the current structure of the organization is the only one possible, and that questioning the Sith code is unacceptable. For him, any divergence was cause for execution. Unorthodox doctrine. Your master cultivated a particularly divergent opinion from the norm amongst the Sith. Perhaps he was questioning the rule of 2, or aspiring to a profound reform of Sith philosophy. Perhaps his divergence was related to his approach to the Force. Perhaps he was even slowly leaning towards the light side. Careful planner. Your master's policy was never to act without first knowing his opponent in details. He instructed you in the art of developing multiple contingency plans to anticipate any possible situation, and made you an excellent analyst and tactician. Adaptability is key. Your master was convinced of the superiority of instinct and adaptability over planning. Flexibility should always prevail on rigid plans. During your training, he constantly tested your intuition and developed your sense of improvisation, whether in combat or on a more global scale. My successor. Whether you are aware of it or not, your master saw in you his successor. Thus he centered your training on an academic transmission of his own techniques, passing on to you his style and his knowledge to make his skills live on through you after his death. You're not me. Your master wanted you to develop your own style, rather than imitate his. As such, he trained you only in the basics, then engaged you in frequent and brutal sparring matches, encouraging you to improvise and develop your own combat techniques to counter him. Sith Scholar. Power through knowledge, your master always said. He was a scholar versed in many sciences and had long travelled across the galaxy to study the history of the Sith, or to accumulate knowledge about peoples and cultures. He shared a lot of it with you. Austerity. Comfort and daily pleasures were banished with your master. During your training he imposed a Spartan lifestyle and constant deprivation, strengthening your self-discipline, tolerance of hunger, thirst, and pain, and taught you many techniques for surviving in hostile territory. Lavish lifestyle. The finer things in life, such as banquets and well-tailored suits, were greatly appreciated by your master. You were initiated into all the mundane pleasures he indulged in on a regular basis. Let's hope it didn't soften you up too much. Trophy Hunter. Your master had a habit of collecting something special on the opponents he had defeated. Perhaps the sabers of the Jedi that he had killed, or perhaps more macabre elements, such as the eyes of his enemies. Either way, he often carried his trophies with him. Thirst for freedom. Your master considered the dark side of the Force as a means to emancipate himself from the established rules and shackles of society. For him, what characterizes a Sith more than his strength is his freedom. He cultivated in you a taste for travel and an aversion to authority. Way of stability. According to your master, peace and happiness within the galaxy can only be achieved through political stability and a strong regime. For him, the dark side of the Force was above all a means of obtaining political power and ruling over the masses with absolute authority. Personal rights. Your master regularly performed a short ritual of his own, perhaps a strange form of meditation before a fight, or he tattooed symbols on his body. Either way, it was of great importance to him. Did you adopt this ritual? Strange interest. Some Sith are not only interested in fighting and power-seeking, but can develop passions for unusual topics. Your master was one of those, and taught you many things about a particular field in which he was an expert. Cooking, perhaps, or music, medicine, Uniology? Daring in all things. Your master was known within the Sith Order as someone who was particularly daring, constantly seeking to put himself in danger, challenging authority, popular beliefs, and often common sense. You've adopted a part of his character. Racism. Whatever species your master belonged to, he regarded it as naturally superior to the other races of the galaxy, and greatly despised those he called the sub-beings. He owned and mistreated many inferior slaves and servants. Never stop learning. Your master was surprisingly humble for a Sith Lord, considering that the apprenticeship of the Force and the lightsaber is an endless journey, and that there is always someone better than you in the galaxy. This principle has shaped you throughout your training, and still does today. Want to eat? Your master taught you in a particularly harsh way that what you wanted, you had to earn it. Want to eat? Go hunt by yourself. Want something? Buy it yourself, or steal it. With him you were not owed anything. Not comforts, not equipment, not even medical care. Etiquette. Whether because of noble origins or simply because of his admiration for civilization, your master was a very refined man who loved to frequent the upper galactic society. He taught you rhetoric, good manners, and all sorts of things useful in the aristocracy. The beast in you. Your master regarded civilization as a perversion created by soft, weak men. For him, true nobility was represented by the primitive savages populating the feral worlds. He taught you many of their hunting techniques, as well as some of their combat skills. Clean hands. Why do something that others can do for you? Following this principle, your master had developed a vast network of agents and spies throughout the galaxy, and surrounded himself with several units of soldiers, allowing him to delegate the majority of his tasks to his agents and supervise them from afar. Hero of his own story. Surprisingly, your master never considered himself a bad guy. On the contrary, for him, the violence he used was always a means of doing good, even indirectly. Whether killing, stealing, destroying, or torturing, he saw all his actions as a necessary evil that had to be done. Headquarters. Every true Sith Lord has a base that he uses as a launching point for his operations, and as a sanctuary in the case of a forced retreat. And yours? Where did he take you after he found you? Pick one headquarters. Mothership. Your master owned a huge ship that he used as a mobile base with which he traveled from planet to planet. The enormous crew that ran the ship was entirely at his service and included mechanics, soldiers, droids, etc. Citadel. Your master's headquarters was a vast military fortress occupied by a massive garrison of soldiers. The place included many combat training facilities and the latest military technology available in the galaxy. Palace. Your master had set up his base on a small paradise-like planet. The place looked like a vast, incredibly luxurious villa, maintained by hordes of slaves and droids, ready to fulfill all their master's desires. Old Temple. Your master had chosen as his base an ancient Sith temple, forgotten by all, lost deep in the misty lands of a planet that has never been charted. Its location was untraceable. The place, majestic but sinister, was imbued with the dark side of the Force. No home. Your master had no headquarters, strictly speaking, perhaps out of personal conviction, or lack of means. Or perhaps he did have a secret base, but has never revealed its location to you. Either way, you have never seen it. Training focus. Every Sith dreams of being perfect in everything, but few achieve it, except for a few geniuses. Very early on, your master identified your strengths and weaknesses and guided your training to maximize your potential. You have 6 training points to share between lightsaber focus and force focus. You cannot assign more than 5 points or less than 1 point to a focus. So you can put 5 points in a focus and 1 in the other, or 4 points in a focus and 2 in the other, or 3 points in each, but you cannot put 6 points in a focus and 0 in the other. Lightsaber focus. Force focus. Duelist. 5 lightsaber focus, 1 force focus. Gain 2 style points, 7 blade points, and 2 force points. It only took a few sparrings for your master to understand that he was dealing with a virtuoso swordsman, a born duelist. It was only necessary for him to demonstrate a technique to you once, so that you could understand it and be able to reproduce it perfectly. Leaving aside your study of the Force, he focused almost exclusively on your training in close combat. Lightsaber orientated. 2 lightsaber focus, 4 force focus. Gain 2 style points, 5 blade points, and 4 force points. You've always been better with a lightsaber than with the Force, and your master soon noticed this. Rather than waste time making you study the advanced mysteries of the Force in depth, he preferred to make you spend more time practicing your katas with a blade and exercising your reflexes and natural dexterity. Balanced student. 3 lightsaber focus, 3 force focus. Gain 1 style point, 3 blade points, and 6 force points. Since you showed equivalent dispositions in terms of force proficiency and lightsaber skill, your master decided to divide your time equally between these 2 disciplines, leaving no part untouched to make you a well-rounded Sith with extensive knowledge of the Force and a very high level of combat expertise. Force orientated. 2 lightsaber focus, 4 force focus. Gain 1 style point, 1 blade point, and 9 force points. From the very start of your training, your master noticed that you had certain ease in manipulating the Force and in understanding some particularly obscure concepts. As a result, he decided to train you to develop your Force powers rather than your lightsaber skills. Wizard. 1 lightsaber focus, 5 force focus. Gain 1 style point, 0 blade points, and 11 force points. You are one of those rare individuals endowed with an exceptional affinity with the Force, an almost natural grasp of its principles. Very quickly, your master sensed in you a very deep resonance with the Force, which flows through you with incredible fluidity. Deciding not to waste your potential, he immersed you in a training dedicated almost exclusively to developing your Force abilities. Your lightsaber. At the beginning of your training, you had to choose the type of sword you were going to use for the rest of your life. This crucial choice would have important consequences on your training and fighting style. Pick 1 type of lightsaber. Standard. The most common type of lightsaber is the standard lightsaber, adapted to all existing fighting styles, extremely versatile. Can be used with 1 or 2 hands, and comes in several different lengths depending on the size of the fighter. The vast majority of the Sith use a standard saber. Dual wielding. Much more uncommon, the simultaneous wielding of 2 blades requires either natural ambidextrousness on the part of the combatant, or extremely difficult training to maximize coordination and synergy between the 2 hands. However, dual wielding offers unique possibilities in close combat. Double blade. Quite rare among the Jedi, more common among the Sith, but still unusual. The double lightsaber is the most difficult weapon to handle, and the most dangerous for its practitioner. However, experts in the art of fighting with this type of saber are incredibly more lethal than others and excel in aggressive and fast moves. Empty hands. For wizards only. By picking this option, you convert your star point into 2 additional force points. In order to attune even more with the Force, you have made the radical decision to do without the lightsaber altogether, focusing entirely in combat on your Force abilities and nothing else, whether attacking or defending. Fighting style. Although every Sith, as they gain experience and survive battles, gradually develop a fighting style of their own, with techniques that only they know and really master, it is still possible to divide the main fighting styles of the Sith into 6 distinct categories, each with its advantages and disadvantages for their practitioners. What style did your master put the emphasis on during your training? Pick at least one style, unless you have chosen the empty hands option. Unlocking a style costs 1 style point. Unlocking an advanced skill costs 1 blade point. You can't buy advanced skills belonging to styles that you didn't unlock. Unlocking multiple styles leads you to develop a unique style, mixing techniques from several disciplines. Duelists, lightsaber-orientated and balanced fighters can convert 2 blade points into 1 style point. They can only do this once. Strong style. Victory through strength. The philosophy on which the strong style is based is to strike few but hard, to favour heavy and few blows, all individually capable of overpowering the opponent over combinations of weak strikes. It's a direct and pragmatic style that requires its practitioners to combine their body weight and muscular strength with the energizing drag of anger, so that the execution of their attacks will land with enough force to crack armors or disarm opponents. To master this style, you had to undergo extremely intense muscular exercises throughout your training. Advanced skills. Heavy parries. Your master has taught you how to apply your physical strength not only in your attacks, but also in your parries. When using this style to defend yourself, you can deflect a blade with enough force to make your foe lose their balance, throw them to the ground, or break their guard. This requires a certain talent for analysis and a keen sense of timing. The Fiery Dance. The technique known as the Fiery Dance consists in a sequence of 3 consecutive swings delivered from 3 different angles with increasing power, the third strike being twice as strong as the previous one and considered almost unstoppable. Strong style practitioners are very fond of this combination that can be repeated several times during a fight by modifying the striking angles. Modular strength. Through meditation exercises, more than physical reinforcement, you have learned to modulate your physical strength with precision, either to reduce it significantly in the middle of a series of blows, thus throwing your opponent off balance, or to exceed your limits for a short time at the cost of exhaustion. In the latter case, you can almost briefly double your maximum strength. Duja Sai. The Duja Sai strike is a dangerous technique, consisting of switching from 2-handed to 1-handed grip on your saber in the middle of the fight, executing a 1-armed parry and simultaneously hardening your free fist with the force, and finally hitting your opponent in the throat. Variations of this skill may involve punching your opponent in the chest or face. Elegant style. Victory through finesse. This style is almost the antithesis of the previous one. Based on a perverted form of the makashi, the elegant style seems similar to antique fencing. The practitioner is encouraged to stand in profile and hold his weapon in one hand. Its techniques rely on precision and efficiency through fluid strikes and lightning-fast thrusts, targeting the opponent's weak spots. Masters of the elegant style do not parry their blows. They deflect them gracefully from the tip of their blade and counterattack swiftly. They also use their balance and footwork to outmaneuver their foe in a duel, while remaining extremely stable themselves. Advanced skills. Aido. You've been trained in the rare and spectacular art of activating your lightsaber and striking in a single, fluid, and continuous lightning-fast movement in order to end the fight in a flash before the opponent can make the slightest move. Experts in this technique can turn their lightsaber off and on repeatedly in rapid succession in the duel to make their attacks completely unpredictable. Go with the flow. Following the principles of various martial arts dedicated to unarmed combat and transposing them to fencing, Sith have developed parry techniques that allow them to deflect gracefully their opponent's strikes with the tip of their blade, and turn the momentum of their attacks against them in order to unbalance them or suddenly bypass their defenses and execute a lethal counter-attack. Feint Master. Your master has taught you a whole range of complex feints, known by very few fighters, making you a very difficult opponent to fight. When they think you'll swing from above, you'll swing from below. When your strike comes from the left, it actually hits from the right. You control the trajectory of your blade with surgical precision and know how to use it with subtlety and intelligence. Disarming strike. Few Sith direct their fighting style towards disarming, preferring to strike to kill, but you have chosen to dedicate a large portion of your training to the art of disarming your foe, whether by cutting off their hand or slicing the hilt of their sword with your blade. This gives you a distinct advantage in combat, as very few lightsaber fighters, whether Jedis or Sith, are trained to deal with this unorthodox style. Defensive style. Victory through observation. Rare are the Sith who adopt this style of fighting, somewhat similar to the Soresu, but it is sometimes taught as a secondary style, in addition to another. The defensive style, as its name suggests, revolves around successive parries and economy of movement and effort. Its practitioners adopt a relatively static posture, centered on defense, and sometimes quick dodges through imperceptible bust and hip movements. The fundamental purpose of this style is to exhaust the opponent and watch for the slightest opening in his guard, offering the opportunity to counterattack. It requires a keen sense of observation and extraordinary reflexes. Advanced skills. Repel shots. Like Jedis who have undergone extensive Xian training, you have become an expert in the art of not only intercepting blaster fires with your lightsaber, but more importantly, of sending them back in any direction, including that of the shooter. You have also developed the ability to deflect shots with your eyes closed, and in any position, through hours of intense and risky training. Alazar Kin. The Alazar Kin is a derivative from the defensive style, allowing its users to predict their opponent's attacks before they even launch them, through the observation of their footwork and subtle muscle movements. With this technique, you don't have to look at your opponent's sword to know where their attacks will come from, only their feet, and you're able to react to the most unpredictable strikes. 360-degree defense. By infusing greater mobility into your defensive style, as well as swirling and spinning parrying techniques, you have been able to block attacks not only from a single opponent, but also from a group of opponents attacking you simultaneously from multiple sides, and even from behind. Your master described your style as similar to a protective sphere without a single weakness. Vicious bait. Particularly audacious, this technique allows you to bait your opponent and lure him to open his guard by exposing a false weak point in your defenses that he will be tempted to attack. Of course, this is just a trick that allows you to create a counterattack opportunity yourself, rather than waiting for one. You slay many foes with this skill. Acrobatic style. Victory through mobility. Fundamentally opposed to the previous style, the acrobatic style is totally orientated towards attack and aggressiveness, based on force-assisted somersaults and leaping strikes. A practitioner of this style is in constant motion, delivering countless blows to his opponent from many directions, including from the airs, at high speed. His masters appear like a blur to their foes, spinning, striking, spinning again, dodging rather than parrying, evading incoming strikes with spectacular backflips and acrobatics. Needless to say, that this style is very risky due to the fact that it neglects defense and exhausts the stamina of his users quickly. Advanced skills. Flying kick. To add variety and unpredictability to your moves, you learn to combine your jumps and somersaults with flying kicks, which you are able to perform in mid-air after or before a lightsaber strike. You have also become able to reinforce your legs with the force to give even more power to your kicks, which are now capable of breaking bones or knocking your opponent out. The wind steps. Having realized that the outcome of a fight depends on a multitude of factors, including the location of the duel, you have learned how to make the most out of your environment in combat. You are able to run on walls, jump over your opponent by leaning against an obstacle, use every innocuous element of your surroundings as a stepping stone to launch an attack, to jump from wall to wall. Mesmerizing dance. Using ancient Sith battle manuals, you've developed a very strange and elusive fighting style, similar to a kind of dance. Your movements are hypnotic and tend to confuse your opponents, who sometimes feel like they're facing several enemies at once instead of one, or try to parry blows that don't exist. Facing you is like fighting an intangible barrage. Antelope Strike. This very challenging and visually spectacular technique consists of amplifying your speed of movement for a fraction of a second by using the Force, going well beyond your muscular limits, and thanks to a series of complex and very fast steps, moving behind your opponent's back in a flash to deliver a deadly strike. Nothing personal, kiddo. Force-based style. Victory through the Force. Only for wizards, Force-orientated, and balanced fighters. This style is the one that the Sith most often turn to when they have a special affinity with the Force. Although rather standard in terms of pure fencing techniques, it is characterized by the inclusion of force-based attacks in combat, such as telekinetic pulls and shoves used in sync with lightsaber strikes. It gives its practitioners great versatility and the ability to engage in combat from a distance, for example by telekinetically throwing objects of the environment at their opponents before following up with their lightsaber strikes. Advanced skills. Floating blades. Very few Sith have the talent to manipulate their lightsabers remotely by telekinesis, with enough intensity and precision to make them lethal. Some of the most gifted are even able to control several sabers at once and swirl them around to attack or protect themselves. However, this kind of technique is extremely psychologically exhausting and can only be used in special circumstances when the Sith has time to focus. Lightning block. Over time, as Force Lightning became one of the favourite abilities of the Sith talented with the Force, it became vital for the Jedi to learn how to protect themselves from it, as well as for the Sith themselves. This skill allows you to parry Force Lightning bolts with the blade of your lightsaber, and even with some effort, send them straight back to your opponent, perhaps with even more power. Shockwave. Through combat meditation exercises, you learned how to make the Force flow along your lightsaber. Thanks to this, you are now able to accompany each of your swings with a Force shockwave that acts as a Force push applied in the direction of your strike. This way, you don't need to free one of your hands to repulse your opponent with the Force, just attack him with your sword. Force parry. You learn to parry not with your sword, but directly intercept your opponent's lightsaber with the Force before it hits you, and stop it in mid-air. You can also slightly deviate the trajectory of your opponent's strikes in combat without them noticing, giving the impression that you are an absolute master of dodging. Of course, it's all very exhausting. Furious style. Victory through passion. This style is probably the one that best incarnates the dark side of the Force, since it requires its practitioners to let themselves be completely submerged by violent emotions in combat, especially anger. It is the most vicious form of lightsaber combat, filled with both fury and malignant grace. The opponent is flooded with a barrage of chaotic and erratic blows, delivered with a combination of speed and bestial force, halfway between the heavy blows of the strong style and the fast and aerial attacks of the acrobatic style. The challenge for a practitioner of this style is to maintain his lucidity despite the rage that grows as the fight goes on. Advanced skills. Taunting cry. In combat, you've made provocation your speciality, not hesitating to taunt your opponent to make fatal mistakes. However, your emotions are so powerful that your screams are infused with the dark side of the Force, and your fury is communicative, capable of blinding a previously serene opponent with sudden rage and madness that they, unlike you, are not prepared to face. Terror. In combat, you are absolutely terrifying. It is not only the screams you utter or your grunts, or the senseless rage in your blows, but even your appearance changes. Lightning flashes dance in your eyes, veins appear in your face, the dark side of the Force exudes from you. Facing you without panicking and dropping your lightsaber requires the courage and self-control that very few warriors possess, even among the Jedi. Cold blood. In contrast to many practitioners of the Furious style, you have committed yourself to full days of meditation during your training to strengthen your mind. This allows you to keep your lucidity in combat, while exploiting your anger in an optimal way. Your emotions do not control you, you control them, and your movements are closer to those of the Jedi Verpad than the Sith Juyo. Hula Sakem. The Hula Sakem is a derivative of the Furious style, even more chaotic and unpredictable than the original. You yourself are almost incapable of knowing where your sword will strike. Its trajectories and angles of attack seem completely incoherent, and without continuity, as if it had become sentient and crazy. Force powers. It is essential for a Sith to master the Force in order to survive. However, the relationship a Sith develops with the Force is unique to each. Is the Force a weapon you use to crush your enemies? A tool dedicated to the fulfillment of your ambitions? An obscure concept that you fear? An omnipresent entity that you are trying to explore and understand? Buy Force powers with your Force points. You get the basic Force powers that every Sith must master for free. Force push, telekinetic repulsion of objects. Force pull, telekinetic attraction of objects. Force jump, telekinetic amplification of jump height, and a few minor powers that act on you passively and make you more sensitive, faster, and stronger than an ordinary being. Level 1 abilities. Each one costs 1 Force point. Force Lightning. Emblematic Sith Force ability, consisting in delivering powerful electrical discharges to a target for the user's fingers and hands. The intensity varies according to many factors, such as the user's talent. Force Barrier. Defensive technique composed of force energy, used to block out any potentially deadly elements, such as environmental hazards or any type of projectiles like blaster fires. Takes the form of a wall or a sphere. Force Sense. Telepathic extension of the user's mind, allowing to feel the living beings around you, even through the walls, or any movement in a certain radius. Also considerably heightens the 5 senses. Battle Precognition. Allows one to sense and foretells the flows of the Force while engaged in battle. Used to predict an opponent's intentions or the trajectory of blaster shots before they are fired. Also amplifies reflexes. Force Pain. Telepathic projectile that produces unbearable pain waves in the brain of a target. Can cause nausea and dizziness. Used for torture. Requires high concentration and thus is difficult to use in combat. Advanced Force Push. Force Push, applied with sufficient intensity to lift several men off the ground and throw them over a distance of at least 10 meters, or break down a metal door whose reinforcement is not too strong. Force Speed. Running speed amplification for a split second. Allows the user to dash in a straight line, of 4 to 5 meters max, so fast that they appear as a blur to any observer. Can be used successively to cover longer distances. Force Choke. Telekinetic use of the Force, oftentimes with a grip-like gesture, to choke or strangle a victim. Restricts blood circulation and airflow. Can be used to lift a victim off the ground, holding them by the neck. Consume Essence. Allows a dark side Force user to feed on the fear, hatred, physical pain or other negative emotions of others in a certain radius to make himself more powerful or recover energy in combat. Advanced Lightning. Requires Force Lightning. Powerful electric discharge branching out into dozens of smaller forks, thus allowing the dark side Force user to reach multiple targets simultaneously without any loss of intensity. Force Stun. Allows the user to induce a target into catatonic state. With enough practice, the effect can extend to several targets at once. Beings or creatures with a high degree of willpower can resist the effects of this ability, as well as droids. Force Horror. Creation of frightening visual and sound illusions in the mind of the target, intended to scare them away, intimidate them, divert their attention or break their concentration during a fight. Force Rage. Channeling of all negative emotions into the heart of the user, such as fear, despair, pain, anger, to convert them into a sudden and intense burst of rage, boosting every physical ability for a few minutes. Force Slow. Ability that clouds the target's mind, causing them to slow down both mentally and physically during the combat, as if they were completely exhausted. At higher degrees of intensity, could even debilitate the victim permanently. Force Cloak. Sending of a telepathic command that propagates concentrically around the user like a ripple and persuades the surrounding minds that the user is insignificant or even non-existent. Force Flash. Allows the user to disable holocams and surrounding electrical devices through a flash of unnatural energy. Also, able to blind an opponent in close combat and neutralize the primal functions of droids for a short time. Force Wave. Requires Advanced Force Push. Same as Advanced Force Push, but applied in a multi-directional shockwave that finally impacts any object or person around the user in a radius of between 3 and 5 meters. Memory Walk. Consists in mentally reaching into the victim's mind, forcing them to relive all the worst memories of their life, both painful ones and ones that were merely embarrassing, over and over again, for a few minutes that seem to be hours. Shadow Vision. Focus of the Force in the eyes of the user. Allows you to see in the dark, zoom in as if you were looking through binoculars, or, with a lot of practice, see through walls. Causes headaches if used too long. Level 2 abilities. Only available for wizards, force-orientated and balanced fighters. Each one costs 2 force points. Force Corrupt. Mind control through hypnosis. Dark side ability that can temporarily manipulate the minds of other sentient beings and make them serve one's own cause. can be resisted through high degree of willpower. Force Crush requires Force Choke. Violent ability consisting in lifting a target, droid, person, even vehicle, into the air with a force, and as they are floating, make their body implode by applying enormous pressure on it. Force Tempest requires Advanced Lightning. Powerful ability, allowing the user to project force lightning from all their limbs simultaneously, in an impressive whirlwind that encircles their body, inflicting damage to everyone around them. Invisibility. Telekinetic bending of light particles and sound waves to render a practitioner virtually invisible to the naked eye. Requires a quasi-surgical mastery of the Force and a high degree of concentration. Cannot be used in combat. Mass Confusion requires Force Horror. Same as Force Horror, but applies to anyone within a certain radius of the user. The illusions are even more vivid, and it is even more difficult to resist them, due to the collective hysteria. Force Explosion requires Force Wave. Same as Force Wave, but at least 5 times more powerful, capable of pulverizing minor buildings and dismembering surrounding people, even those wearing armor. Force Drain. Dark side counterpart of Jedi Force Healing. Heals the user's wounds through cell regeneration by absorbing the vital energy of a victim, causing them to age at an accelerated rate as you apply your power to them. Force Scream. Force exertion that manifests through a scream of rage or grief that echoes through time and space, disrupting the flow of the Force at an extremely large radius, physically and mentally hurting every Force user able to feel it. Force Stasis requires Force Choke. Ability to telekinetically freeze an opponent in mid-air or paralyze someone completely. The higher the velocity of the target before the power is applied, the more difficult it is to keep it static for a long time. Heavy Telekinesis requires Advanced Force Push. Ability to telekinetically lift, throw, and manipulate massive objects such as large groups of persons, spaceships, large trees, or heavy boulders. Force Citadel requires Force Barrier. Same as Force Barrier, but way more powerful and electrified, can hurt anyone who touches it. Can protect its user from huge explosions, lightsaber strikes, or cataclysms capable of pulverizing entire buildings. Force Compass allows its user to feel and recognize the Force signature of a Force user who has been there, and to follow their trail without ever losing it, even from planet to planet. Also useful for detecting Force users at great distances. Force Destruction requires Advanced Force Push. Creation of a massive and ultra-dense energy field that can be thrown in any direction. It can easily blast a large radius, vaporizing anyone who got too close to it, even walls and reinforced doors. Insensibility. Half force manipulation, half self-hypnosis. This ability allows the user to completely shut himself off, completely, from his physical sensations and thus nullify pain or any feeling of exhaustion. Level 3 abilities. Only available for wizards. Each one costs 3 force points. Deadly Sight. Projection of ultra-intense hatred for a sinister glare onto the target, as long as the target is into the practitioner's range of vision. Skin is dissolved instantly. Extremities are vaporized. The victim's flesh burns and smokes in a few seconds, causing an unbearable agony. Life Ritual requires 2 level 2 abilities. Ritual of Tremendous Power, designed to absorb the vital energy of a very large number of people, as well as plants and minerals, in order to prolong one's own life expectancy, and achieve a form of pseudo-immortality. Can cause the death of a planet. Lightning Cataclysm requires Force Tempest. An incredibly intense electrical discharge that spreads over tens of meters and can reach more than 100 people. Causes sufficient heat to liquefy the metal and disintegrate the flesh in a split of a second. Midichlorians Manipulation. Manipulation of midichlorians on a cellular level. Ability to perform amazing miracles or unnatural abominations, depending on your point of view, such as creating life from the Force, producing biological mutations, etc. Force Maelstrom requires Force Explosion. Same as Force Explosion, but of such power that the shockwave devastates everything in a radius wide enough to pulverize several large surrounding buildings with enough intensity to throw heavy vehicles tens of meters into the air. Surgical telekinesis. Telekinesis applied with great precision to the point of being able to kill a living being with a thought by rupturing a vein or crushing neurons in the brain. Also allows to render a limb inoperative by telekinetically cutting off a nerve or tendon. Sever Force. A rare ability that allows you to interrupt a living being's connection with the Force, depriving them momentarily or over a long period of time of any use of the Force. When applied to yourself, makes you undetectable to Force Sense or Force Compass. Force Portal. Manipulation of the fabric of space itself with the Force. Creation of space portals, allowing the user to move instantaneously over immense distances, for example from one planet to another. Consumes enormous amounts of energy. Time Stop. Requires Force Stasis. Same as Force Stasis, but applied to any inert or living object around you, within a radius of 10 to 20 meters, giving the impression that time has stopped completely. Cannot be maintained for more than 1 minute. Training events. Sometimes you think back to your youth and the adventures you had during your training. All memories are precious, the good ones as well as the bad ones. What are your most intense memories, and how did they shape you? Pick up to 3 memories, and a conclusion for each. Forbidden Love. Many people think the Sith can't love. That's not true. They can, and yet are forbidden to, because Sith are strong, and love makes you grow weak. You had a forbidden and sulphurous love affair during your training with an anonymous girl you met on a planet, on a mission. Perhaps, or another Sith apprentice. Perhaps even a Jedi Padawan. A well-kept secret. Both of you have managed to keep your relationship a secret and continue to date each other in short but intense reunions. Do you still see each other? Caught in the act. Your master surprised you both when you thought you were alone. Then what happened to the girl? Did your master force you to kill her, or did he firmly forbid you to see her again? Path of Solitude. You yourself severed all bonds with that girl despite her cries and pleas. From now on, only the dark side matters to you, and you don't need anyone else. Only the Force. Campfire Talk. A curious shiver runs through you when you think back to that strange evening on a distant planet as you camped around a fire beside your master. He started a conversation with you, infused with a humanity and sincerity that is rare in the Sith Lord, which has marked you forever. What did he talk to you about that night? The Confession. Your master told you about him, lifting for you the veil on his past, revealing to you a hidden side of his personality. You never looked at him the same way again afterwards. The Tale. Your master shared with you that night a forgotten, even hidden, part of Sith history, and taught you things that no apprentice is supposed to know. The Legacy. Your master transmitted to you that night an ancestral technique that he had learned from his own master. You vowed to pass it on to your future apprentice in due course. The Wandering Sentinel. You will remember all your life this disastrous mission that your master sent you to accomplish. You were tracked and intercepted, far with all possible help by a Jedi Shadow, a Jedi Sentinel dedicated to the eradication of the Sith and their followers, and his men. How did you survive? A sinister scar. You fought valiantly and miraculously managed to escape from them, but not without him leaving a scar on your body and the promise of one day finding you to end this story. The Merciful Jedi. He had you at his mercy, his lightsaber ready to decapitate you, but he turned away and simply ordered you to get out of his sight. A sign of compassion towards a child? Last-minute rescue. Later, you understood that he was there from the start, hidden in the shadow. You were only a bait to lure the Jedi. They didn't sense your master coming, and he unleashed hell on them. Survival. You still remember that damn feral plant you spent months on. A treacherous jungle spreading as far as the eye can see, full of deadly danger. How did you end up there? Did your master send you there on a mission, or did your ship just crash there by accident? There, you experienced something that changed you fundamentally. Living God. You met a tribe of natives and spent a few weeks among them, considered a living God. They taught you secrets about the Force unknown even to the Sith. Law of the strongest. You managed to survive on your own in this hell, and when you managed to escape from it, you were much stronger, tougher, and tenacious. The Mentor. You found on this planet an exiled old Sith, living as a hermit. You managed to gain his respect and learn various lightsaber techniques from him that were totally unknown to you. The rival. Sometimes you think back to the first time you met the one who became your rival. Who were they? Another Sith Lord's apprentice? A Jedi Padawan on a mission? A bounty hunter? You don't really remember what caused this rivalry between the two of you, but you know that it is not going to end anytime soon. How has this rivalry evolved today? Healthy rivalry. You don't know if they are your friend or your rival. This ambiguous relationship is a mixture of respect, admiration, and a certain jealousy of the other's talents. Fierce rivalry. It pains you to admit it, but the boss is good. Of course, you'll never accept that they're stronger than you. Equal, perhaps. Not for long, of course. Hostile rivalry. They're less your rival than your nemesis. You've fought each other many times, but no one's been able to kill the other one yet. Death, however, is the only thing that can bring an end to your long-standing conflict. Ghost from the past. It was in a filthy cantina, in a half-ruined station, that your paths crossed again. A face you had long forgotten from your past life appeared before you. Was it an old friend? A relative, perhaps? An influential person in your youth, like a mentor or a teacher, before you met your master? What happened then? Have a drink, pal. You talk for hours over a drink about the past, about the good times, about what won't happen again. And then you say goodbye, aware that your paths were too far apart now to cross again. Silence. You looked at each other in silence for a long time, painfully aware that you no longer had anything in common. Turning your back on them was hard, but you had to. Sever the ties. You couldn't leave behind you anything that connected you to your past. A Sith has no past. Your lightsaber spoke for you, and erected a face from your memory. The holocron. As a part of your training, your master once handed you a strange, dusty, ominous-looking holocron, and locked you in a room with the device, with only instructions to discuss with the being who lived in it. And that's what you did, anxious but curious. What kind of information was stored in that holocron? The Fallen. It was the datacron of a black Jedi. He taught you many things about the Jedi Order, its weaknesses, and its darkest aspects, giving you a distinct advantage over them. The Founder. It was the datacron of one of the earliest Sith Lords, and the knowledge of the Force and the dark side he delivered to you is priceless. The Entity. Whatever came out of the holocron was an obscure, shapeless thing. It gave you many disturbing teachings about the universe itself, the fabric of reality, and your own destiny. Baptism of Fire. To lead men into battle is never easy. That day was your first time, and you'll remember it for the rest of your life. Your master had placed a squad of soldiers under your command, and sent you to the battlefield to eliminate some of his enemies, entrenched in a fortress. What struck you most that day, as you advanced under the continuous fire of the opposing camp? The horror of war. The smell of blood. The sight of charred corpses. The screams of agony. That day was a milestone in your training, and toughened you up considerably against the violence of the galaxy. The ecstasy of battle. The adrenaline rushing to your brain. The hissing of blaster shots in your ears. The danger. What a day. After that battle, you knew you had found your true calling. The sorrow. You lost many soldiers that day. Your soldiers. They say the Sith have no feelings. Well, you decided after that battle that you would be the first to care for the lives of your men from now. The lightsaber. As you look at your lightsaber, you can't help but recall the unconventional way you acquired it and the adventures that followed. It has its own history, and it's just as unique as the Sith who wears it. So, under what circumstances did you attain your lightsaber? Or rather, under what circumstances did he choose you? The Champion. How you ended up as a gladiator in the arena of Bespara one day would be too long a story. What matters is that you took your saber from the champion's corpse after killing him with a knife. The game. As improbable as it may seem, you won it in a game of dice against a prince of royal blood, in a ship slowly drifting towards a black hole, and you were drunk. The treasure. You found it, buried under the sand of a beach, in a chest. You were guided by a strange voice resonating in your mind. To this day, you're convinced it was the lightsaber itself. Sith Trial. One day, Your master decided to test you by presenting you with a particularly arduous challenge on an isolated planet, designed to test a specific aspect essential to a Sith. You still have a cold sweat as you look back on that day, and the unlikely way you came through it. What exactly was your master trying to test? Your dexterity. You were dropped in the desert, deprived of your lightsaber, and had to face an incredibly dangerous beast head-on with a rudimentary and unsuitable weapon. Your resolve. You were instructed to brave a blizzard and climb a huge mountain with your bare hands to pick a flower growing exclusively at the top. Your wit. You had to go through a very ancient underground maze, filled with strange puzzles and cryptic riddles. One tiny mistake was all it took to trigger deadly traps. First kill. The first kill may be traumatic for some Sith, but it is a necessary step to detach oneself from one's humanity and begin one's true progression into the dark side of the Force. It is not uncommon for a Sith Master to script the very first murder committed by his apprentice to make the moment even more impactful. Who were you tasked to kill? A bunch of thugs. There were 3 of them, and they were armed. You were not. Your master ordered them to kill you and warned you that he would not help you. You're still alive. They're not. Innocent people. A couple of civilians that your master had randomly kidnapped from some village. Kill them, he told you in a cold voice. A disciple obeys his master. A rich merchant. Breaking into his heavily guarded villa was a challenge in itself. Assassinating him in his bed without waking his wife was a real feat. Escape, chased by his men on alert? You don't even know how you did it. The Ziggurat. How you discovered this temple would be an interesting story in itself. Were you on a mission for your master? Were you lost on a planet that once belonged to the Sith in ancient and forgotten times? Or was this entire journey just a dream, induced by the dark side of the Force? Either way, you found something very valuable in that place. Yourself. As apparent as it may seem, it was you yourself who you encountered in this temple, and who you fought with your sword and with the Force. The result of this duel? You tell me. The fountain. The water flowing in it was as black as ink. You took a sip, and it was enough to permeate your very soul. It was pure force, in liquid form, and incredible power passed through your veins. An answer. You do not know how you managed to decipher the runes covering the inner walls of the temple, but they revealed a dark secret about yourself. And so, the student became the master. 2 there should be. No more, no less. One to embody power, the other to crave it. But to keep alive the Sith lineage, the apprentice has to slay the master to gain the title and take on their own disciple. The day you killed your master is perhaps the most vivid and most burning of all your memories. The day you became a Sith Lord. How did it happen? Pick a memory. Epic duel. When the time came, you simply challenged your master properly. You faced each other, silent for a few seconds, then faced each other in an incredible duel, at the end of which you surpassed your master and killed him. In his eyes, you saw that he died knowing that his legacy was in good hands. Assassination. You murdered your master when he least expected it. Perhaps you killed him in his bed while he slept, hid a bomb in his ship, or poured poison into his glass during a meal. Either way, he died without a fight, perhaps never knowing of your treachery. After all, isn't that the way of the Sith? Surprise attack. Naive master. Too sure of himself. He lowered his guard when he shouldn't have, and you took the opportunity to jump on him and backstab him, slashing him with your lightsaber. Cursing you, coughing blood, he tried to defend himself after that, but it was too late. His agony was not pretty to see. It's a trap. You devised a strategy to lure your master into a trap from which he would have no chance to escape. Perhaps you gave the Jedi Order his geographic coordinates so they could set up an ambush. Either way, he was killed by his enemies while you watched your work from a distance, satisfied. Left for dead. It was right after a battle or a fight against his enemies. Half dead, bloody, heavily injured, he crawled to you and asked for help. You gave him nothing but a look of disdain and a whisper, "Weak man." You then turned your back on him, abandoning him to his fate. To this day, you don't know if he survived this betrayal or not. Vanished. Actually, you didn't kill your master. In fact, when you felt that you had nothing more to learn from him, you simply seized the first opportunity to escape from his vigilance, stole a spaceship, and disappeared without a trace. Does your master believe you are dead now? Or is he still looking for you, somewhere? Sith Lord name. What is a Sith Lord without a proper name? You had to adopt one after leaving the teachings of your master. What is it? You are Darth. When you look at the dark side, careful. You must be, for the dark side looks back.